Okay, so let's talk about a document that's over 800 years old, a name we all know, the Magna Carta. But what if the story we all learned in school, the one about freedom and justice, misses the most revolutionary part? What if the real story wasn't about rights, but was actually all about the money?
Right, so when you hear Magna Carta, your mind probably jumps straight to things like the rule of law, fair trials, the very foundations of modern democracy. And look, you're not wrong, those ideas are absolutely in there. It's kind of the granddaddy of all constitutional documents. But the true genius, the thing that made all those other freedoms even possible, was all financial. See, the Magna Carta wasn't just some political wish list. It was basically history's first written financial constitution. It was a revolt that was aimed squarely at the king's wallet, because the rebels knew that's where the real power lived.
To really get why they went for the king's wallet, you gotta meet the man who was forced to sign it, King John. And King John had a serious problem with money. The main issue being, he wanted all of it.
John was in a really tough spot from the get-go. He inherited a kingdom that was just drowning in debt thanks to his brother Richard the Lionheart's crusades. And then, to make things worse, he immediately lost almost all his family's lands in France, earning him the super embarrassing nickname John Lackland. He became completely obsessed with raising cash for wars to try and win it all back. To John, every subject, every baron, was just a walking ATM. He didn't see taxes as a necessity for the kingdom. He saw it as a personal opportunity. And check this out. This really puts his greed into perspective. His own father, Henry II, levied a major tax just 4 times in over 3 decades. John, he demanded one 11 times in just 7 years. I mean, this wasn't just taxation anymore. This was straight-up relentless extortion. His favorite tool for this was a tax called scutage, or shield money. Now, originally, it was just a fee that barons could pay to get out of fighting in a war, but John turned it into a weapon. He'd demand scutage constantly, inventing reasons, sometimes not even bothering to invent a war. He was literally bleeding his own lords dry, pushing them right to the edge of bankruptcy. So the barons decided to do something about it, but their goal wasn't to, chop off the king's head. It was something way more clever and way more permanent. They decided to take away his credit card. And this quote right here just illustrates their strategy perfectly. When they finally cornered John at Runnymede in 1215, the document they made him sign was, for all intents and purposes, a financial contract. It was a debt agreement dressed up in the fancy language of liberty, but it was designed to do one thing above all else: control the king's power to spend. The absolute heart of this financial revolution is found in just a few key clauses, and it all starts with this number you see here, Article 12. This is the one. This is the clause that changed everything. So what did Article 12 actually do? Well, it said that the king could no longer just levy scutage or any other major tax without getting permission first. Boom. With the stroke of a pen, his unlimited power to fund his whims was just gone. The only exceptions were for 3 very specific traditional things: ransoming him if he got captured, knighting his oldest son, and marrying off his oldest daughter. For literally everything else, he had to ask. And another part, Article 14, laid out exactly how he had to ask. It created a whole new process. First, the king has to explain why he needs money. Second, he has to call a common council of the kingdom's most powerful barons and church leaders. Third, that council has to debate it and then give their okay. Only after getting a yes could he even think about collecting the tax. This, right here, is the blueprint for every modern parliament. This table really just sums up the whole transformation. You go from a system where the nation's treasury is basically the king's personal piggy bank to the very beginning of public finance. You go from the king having the sole power to tax to that power being held by a representative council. And, most importantly, you go from zero accountability to a system where the king actually has to justify his spending. This is the birth of financial accountability as we know it. Now, of course, King John and the kings who came after him ignored the Magna Carta whenever they thought they could get away with it. But the idea, this powerful idea that a leader can't just take your money without asking, that never died. In fact, it grew, and it eventually crossed an ocean. And as you can see, that idea had legs. 400 years later, the exact same principle fueled the English Civil War. When King Charles I tried to impose taxes without Parliament's permission, Parliament pushed back, citing their ancient rights from Magna Carta. Then, a century after that, the same idea became the rallying cry for the American Revolution.
Because what is no taxation without representation really? It's the spirit of Magna Carta's Article 12, just repackaged for the 18th century. The American colonists were arguing that because they didn't have any representatives in the British Parliament, that Parliament had no right to tax them. They were making the exact same argument the barons made against King John all those centuries before. So, what's the big lesson here? What's the takeaway? It's something simple, something profound, and something that's as true today as it was in 1215. Power always follows the purse.
This is the core principle. If you want to control a government, a ruler, anyone with power, you don't start with philosophical debates. You start by controlling their ability to raise and spend money. A leader who can't fund an army, or build palaces, or pay off their supporters without getting permission is a leader whose power is fundamentally limited.
And that right there was the true genius of the Magna Carta. The barons understood that money was the engine of King John's tyranny. So they didn't just try to smash the engine, they locked the fuel tank and handed the key to a council. In that one single move, they laid the foundation for every budget debate, every parliamentary spending committee, and every system of financial checks and balances we rely on today.
Which, leaves us with a fascinating question for our own time. In an age of incredibly complex global finance and government spending, does this 800-year-old principle still hold true? Is the most effective path to limiting absolute power still found by just following the money? It's something to think about.